You know, James, he's a modest guy, as you know. He played for the Leafs, and we washed that out of him. He even said he's not a Leaf fan anymore, right?
Yeah, no.
Right?
I
Okay.
leaves quickly. Yeah.
Okay. And then he went to San Jose, but he had a terrific year this year. And the Florida Panthers were chasing a couple teams at the end. James went 9-2 at the end of the season. His team played really well, but just fell short. But the saying is now, as you know, James, that if you get in, you can win. So as you're looking at these playoffs and thinking you guys came that close, what are some of your thoughts about the teams and some of the individuals?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a pretty cool playoff so far. I mean, when you're not in it, I mean, you're a little bit bitter. So that's something to get over. But no, I think a team maybe that kind of impresses me or that has gained some of my respect, and I think probably from a lot of you too, is Vegas. I mean, I was kind of hard on them all year and wasn't buying in, wasn't jumping on the bandwagon, but I mean, they just keep playing so well, and they're playing well as a team, a lot of heart. So, it's hard not to respect what they've done.
Well, John, did John have to leave? John Paddock was here, right? The Pats are in the Memorial Cup. Do you have any recollections of your time in Regina?
Yeah, not a lot of great memories coming back here. Played my first WHL game here, and I got lit for 6. And so a guy by the name of Peter Callis had 6 points, 3 goals and 3 assists, so I'm pretty sure I made his junior career. I'm getting over it.
Yeah, I don't know if he turned pro, but if he did, I'm sure he's going to send you a check for helping him get
something,
there.
Yeah.
Hey, you grew up in Arborg, Manitoba. Raise your hand if you know where Arborg is.
Wow.
Wow,
impressive.
That's impressive. But James, as you know, in today's world of hockey, especially in Canada, kids start playing so young. It becomes very intense at an early age. They're involved in organized hockey, travel hockey, the grandparents, the parents, and everyone. What was your experience like? Did you have the same kind of experience growing up?
Yeah, not really. I mean, like a lot of kids, and especially in this wonderful country, you start skating when you're 3 and whatnot, playing on the outdoor rink. But I didn't start playing organized hockey till I was 12. And so, hockey was never, a big deal. I mean, you had family, and you went to church, and you went to school, and you worked a regular job or whatever, and those were kind of the important things. And hockey was never really too much of an option. And so, it's a very different beginning than most kids, I'd say.
Well, I know you didn't play. Like, were you frustrated? I mean, did you ever go to your mom and dad and say, hey, how come I can't play organized hockey? Or growing up, were there other situations that were occurring that your mom and dad were trying to impress upon you?
Yeah, I mean, I think one reason, I think sometimes hockey culture can be a difficult one, and so I think that's one thing they were trying to, protect me from, or make sure that I was, strong enough as a person, and maybe in my faith too, to be able to handle an environment. And so, but yeah, I remember, I think I was 11, and one of the nearby towns, they asked me to play, and I think my parents said no, and so I was pretty choked. I remember begging and wanted to play. But then the next year, another town, Arborg, asked if I could play because they didn't have a goalie, and so finally they let me play. So I was pretty pumped about that. But even through like growing up and up into midget, I didn't play summer hockey and some of those more of those elite travel teams and whatnot. And I remember kind of being, maybe a little choked that I couldn't play on those teams. But again, I always dreamed that I could play in the NHL and dreamed that it could happen. And you have a little spark in you that says you could, but I just never grasped that it could be a reality. And so I was never, super disappointed that I didn't ever get to play on those teams.
As a kid, was your faith a big part of growing up? I know for kids sometimes I didn't really think of that when I was young, but was that something that was in your mind where you would pray and think of Jesus at times?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I grew up in a really small community, and so I played my hockey in Arborg, but I'm technically from a really small farming Christian community of like 100, 150 people, where everyone's kind of related. Your uncle's the pastor, and he's also the principal. Your dad's on the school board, and so it's a pretty small town. And so, yeah, I mean, faith was kind of just something you grew up with. And it was always impressed upon me, especially by my parents. I remember when I first started playing hockey, my dad was like, well, you can play hockey, but we're not missing, one church service. And over the years, obviously, that kind of came up in tournaments and whatnot. But, he always instilled, the importance of church and of faith. And so, that was always big for me, just from learning from them from that.
Now, when you got drafted, I think out of midget, that was a pretty big turning point. Can you just give us a couple examples of your experience in junior, and then you went to the minor league pro, and a lot of challenges for you, ups and downs, but yet you were able to get through it all. Can you just touch on that a little bit, James?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few instances where, as I said earlier, I always believed there's a little spark in you, a dream that you could play, but you didn't really think it was a reality. And there's kind of two instances. When I got drafted, that was one where I was like, oh, maybe this could happen. Maybe this could actually be a reality. And then in the 2010-11 season is when I first played my first NHL game. And so that training camp, I played an exhibition game, and I played against, some big players of the day, Jeff Carter, Mike Richards. I think Hartnell was playing in that exhibition game. And we ended up winning, and I played well and went to a shootout. Bobrovsky was actually the other goalie. We went 11 rounds, and of course everything in Toronto gets blown up, way out of proportion. But it was at that point when, I thought, well, maybe this could happen. But yeah, I mean, there was different times, lows where, really had to rely on for me, Christ, and you don't know what's gonna happen. I know my last year junior, which is a pretty important year. I hadn't signed with Toronto yet, and I had got a high ankle sprain and missed the last half of the season. I remember thinking, like, well, who was going to sign a hurt and injured goalie? What's going to happen? And being kind of worried about it. And there's times throughout my career that was one of them, and there's other ones where it's just like, you can't control it, and so just back to kind of basics, what it is in hockey. Sometimes we say it, but the basics of Christianity, just trusting Jesus and seeing what's going to happen and kind of being okay with whatever result comes. And he was, kind enough to bless me with being able to sign and then, carry on an NHL career.
Well, for a lot of players, Rob and Reimer still here. Well, there's Reimer. He's been married a long time like I have, but we want to get the wives involved. You married a terrific girl by the name of April, and you have a child now, a little daughter, which is pretty exciting. But, in the course of those travels and those ups and downs, how did April help you through those things?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, my wife, she's a wonderful woman, and we got an awesome little daughter now, and so, a ton of fun. But, I mean, your wife's your best friend. I mean, I think that's kind of an old adage and whatnot, but it's true. I mean, she's always been my number one fan, and there's been a lot of lows where you come home and whether you just got lit or the coach yelled at you or something, there's obviously a lot of times where things aren't so peachy, and she's been right there, picking me back up, and then also the highs. She loves celebrating, and like I said, she's your best friend. So when things are going well, there's no one else better to share with. So she's been huge for me.
Does she chirp in on when you're playing bad, like your butterfly? My wife used to tell me, you're not bending your knees very well, and it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing sitting in the stands, especially in Colorado, Reimer, when I'd give up 7 or 8. And I said, you didn't even skate. You become my coach, but some of that advice is good.
Yeah, I mean, what's good about her is she's probably brutally honest sometimes, and so sometimes I'm looking for a little affirmation and whatnot, and she'll just be quiet, and I'm like, yeah, and she's like, well, honey, I don't know if you were that good tonight. And I was like, all right, well, but hey, at least when she says I did well, then at least I know she's telling the truth.
Yeah, and there's nobody more honest than a good woman, and that keeps us in line. Now, in today's world, James, it's getting pretty crazy. We know what's going on. Just so many things breaking down, marriages, relationships, personal relationships between people, another school shooting, just a lot of stuff coming at people that they have to deal with. And, and think about So I was just wondering if you had something that you could share with us that would be encouraging, something that you have found really helps in your life. I think we'd like to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, like you said, there's some tough events going on in the world, and I think we all, have different struggles. I mean, there's a lot of faults in me. I mean, maybe it's not as many as Chico, but no, I mean, like I find for myself sometimes you get so caught up and sometimes you have the wrong focus. You're broken and you have different failures. For me, you have a fear of failure. You worry too much about maybe what other people are thinking. Mm-hmm. You have what's your identity. Different things like that, right? And sometimes you get focused on okay, Lord, let's work on this thing, or help me with this, or way too focused on it. And for me, the best way I can describe it maybe is something that gives me nightmares. Maybe is the Tampa Bay power play. I mean, if you've watched in the playoffs, I mean, I think every goalie has nightmares about it. But there's so many options, right? So there's Stamkos over here, and so you're worried about him, and then it goes over to Kucherov, and bam, back of the net. Then so you're worried about Kucherov, and it goes to Hedman. He can bomb it from the middle, back of the net. And so there's so many, and then they have a backdoor play, of course. And so you can't get focused on one person, and if you do, then you get in trouble. And then you think, okay, I'll worry about all of them, But then you're overwhelmed because you can't handle that. So in hockey, for me, it's you think you're a pretty good goalie, so you just trust in what you can do. Trust your positioning, trust your compete level. Are you looking at the puck and trust that that's going to be good enough? And so how I would relay that to my walk is there's all these things, and yet all you have to do for me, or what I challenge myself is just kind of dive into Christ and let Him kind of do the work. I mean, it's you can ask for a cup of water, it can help me with this, help me with that, but I think He asks, just dive into the lake and let me take care of you. He can do immeasurably more than anything you can ever ask or want. And so for me, it's just challenging myself to tap into that and let Him, let things overflow.
Oh, that is very encouraging. And the last question, James, I'm in the media. Rod Peterson's here. He's in the media. And when an athlete, especially a follower of Jesus, wins something, it happened in the Kentucky Derby 2 weeks ago. Today is another race. This horse and jockey's probably going to win the Triple Crown. And it happened when the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl. The coach went up, and they're interviewing them on national TV. And the first thing that the athlete would say, I really want to thank Jesus, for this, and they might say something else. And I find some people say, so what's that all about? Like God's cheering for them and not for them, and da-da-da-da-da. And so it gets misinterpreted. I'm sure you've all heard those things where especially in the States, a lot of guys do that. But I don't know that people really understand when a person's a follower of Christ, an athlete, and he achieves something really high, that's what he's saying. God's my personal coach, or He favors me more. What do you think's going on there?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think when guys do it, I mean, obviously it's sometimes obviously it's an emotional response, but I think first and foremost, when you're a follower of Christ, I mean, and somebody gives you an opportunity to say what's the most important thing to you, you want to say Christ, and I think also maybe mostly what it is I think as a follower you believe that God is the giver of all good things, right? Whether it's a beautiful sunrise or sunset, or a nice delicious steak you cut into, or maybe it's the birth of a child, and maybe it's the Kentucky Derby or the Stanley Cup or something like that, and you're just so thankful for just every good thing that He does, and I think it's just an overflow of gratitude and just understanding that He is a good God, and just recognizing those blessings.
Very well said. Thank you, James. And we want to say that we heard it first at this breakfast. So, Florida Panthers, are they in the playoffs next year for sure?
Automatic.
Okay, you heard it first. Thank you, James.